So today is Monday, October 5th, 2020, and for those of you who are wondering, no, I'm not dead, and no, I haven't sold or given up on this project. I know it's been quite a while since the last video. I don't even want to look. I know it's probably been over a year at least, probably. Anyways, getting back on track. So I'm going to go through an update of what I've done and take you through a bunch of stuff. So first I'll start by saying that, as you might assume, I haven't been working on this the whole time. It's been sitting around not getting any work done to it. There were other things going on, and without really getting into it, you know, there wasn't a lot of work going on. So all the work that I'm going to go over has been in the past, oh, I don't know, 3, 4, maybe 5 months or so. But anyways, that's what it is. So if you remember the way it looked from the last time, a lot of people may be thinking, well, it doesn't look like that big a deal. You've got the new floor in and the new trunk pan. But that's just what it looks like, right? So let me start from the front. We'll kind of work our way back. So last time you saw it, there was a big hole in the firewall. So I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but like most people do, I was planning on doing a smooth firewall, right? Which meant, you know, the hole for the heater would need to be plugged up and things like that. So a lot of times you can do it with just a single piece of sheet metal. I was able to find this, which was custom made for first gen Camaros. It's got kind of this indentation, which leads me to believe, you know, it sometimes the distributor will hit back there. I don't think the LS engines need the clearance, but it's there. If I don't like it, I can always block it off, I guess. It's not really too valuable space I'll lose in the engine compartment. But anyway, so once the firewall is out, you know, and then part of the trunk pans were cut out, you know, the same thing that was with the quarter panels is what's really left, right? So the floor panels, or sorry, kick panels are new, right? Now, you know, once I make a new connection and grind and weld, I like to get the exposed metal primed. So once I do that, I'll just end up painting a majority of it the kick panels or this black EDP coating. But the firewall is all bare metal, obviously. So I did that. And so of course the cowl panels are new. You saw that in the previous video. Those are new on there. So I painted this with epoxy primer. I kind of scuffed it up. I've got a little bit of some short strand body filler I'm going to try and put in here. A lot of these are very, I don't know if you can make that out, very subtle kind of indentations where the welds were. And then I'll put maybe some 2K high build primer on it. So problems I had was the one skill that really needed to be developed on this project, not so much the mechanical or electrical or anything like that, is the welding. So particularly with this, you know, relatively thin auto body sheet metal, you tend to blow through it a lot easier, as I find out. There's a lot of a technique to it, as I'm sure everybody can attest, which I knew and I tried to practice, but there's just some things you just have to kind of learn by doing. But so in through here, getting this joint in through here, spent a lot of time on that. And this was actually, I don't think I miscut this wrong, but I think that's the way it came, but I had to put this filler piece in. So doing a butt patch on this, and then making this meet up here required some modification on my part. But I got it all to fit, you know, and everything is, again, as everybody probably knows, each car is unique and different, has different challenges, or I should say different places where it just doesn't line up or it's out of square or whatever. But so a fair amount of work went into that. But so back to what I replaced. So that the kick panels there were replaced, and then the torque boxes too. Part of the reason I replaced those was because to get at the inner and outer rockers. So I've replaced both the left and the right inner and outer rockers. And part of that was I knew I would have to do the inner rockers on some of these, or the outer rockers. I had cut them open to get some of the, literally the mouse nest out. And you know, once you start to replace these, they come as whole pieces, obviously. And yes, I know you don't need to use the whole thing. You can just cut the piece out and patch it in. But even the pieces that are in quote-unquote relatively good shape, just a personal preference, but I would rather replace the whole thing and know that the whole thing is good all the way through, real solid metal, no pitting or anything. Because even on the old ones where it was quote-unquote good in areas up here, it still had some pitting and things like that. Plus I put some good epoxy primer on the inside of all of these, so I know that these are really going to be good to go on the inside. But that's a lot of work. So I've replaced the 2 torque boxes, right and left, the 2 kick panels, the firewall, and then of course the floor. You know, it's a big piece, so you struggle with it a lot, but it went in relatively okay. So the bracing you saw in here I've obviously removed since then, and the bracing did help a lot to kind of keep it square, but even then it was difficult, right? So one of the overall challenges that I've had so far in this is that keeping everything lined up. So structurally speaking, the bracing is good for keeping things held together so things don't wobble and all of that. And that helped on the floor pan. And although it may be obvious to a lot of people, and maybe to me if I'd thought about it, but with the ass end here, there isn't many points of reference. And if I'd thought about it before I took it apart, maybe I would have tried to put some more in, but I spent a lot of time taking diagonal measurements from the left down to the right, and then from the upper right down to the lower left here, making sure the thing was absolutely square. So I must have put this thing in and out 50 times, getting the frame rails on it. So the frame rails are new too, as you might expect. The trunk pan is all new. I had originally gotten a partial floor pan, but you know, as you might guess with these mini tubs, right? Well, by the time you cut out the part of the floor pan for the mini tubs, you know, you've got the partial floor pan, which I think goes to about here, right? And then all you're saving is this piece right here. And it was a little banged up. It wasn't too bad, but there isn't really much to save, and particularly if you're going to put in the cross member for the DSE Quadrolink, as I plan to do, you know, what's really left? So it was better just to do the whole full trunk pan. And so as I mentioned, I'm going with the DSE mini tubs. I already got them over against the wall there. I have them epoxy primed. So here's all the cutouts for it with the close-off plates, things like that, with the turn downs and all this. And so there's several videos on the internet about how to do this, including the one from DSE. And between all of them, you can get a pretty good idea of what you're in for, what to expect, all of that. So the one thing I will say though is, you would think that this level of disassembly, it would make it easier. In a lot of ways it does, so you certainly have more access. But the problem, as I came to find out, is that you just have less points of reference. So I had to do these cutouts in the floor pan here without a wheel tub installed. So they tell you to use the template and back it off from the wheel tub. Well, there's no wheel tub, right? There's the cutout, which could or couldn't be off, right? Because everything's got to be shaped to fit a little bit. So you've got the cutout, but there isn't really that much to go on. And then it's got to line up with the floor pan, which isn't cut out or lined up. So there's a lot of it that makes it more difficult. So I was ready to put in the mini tubs. I've got the mini tub inners and the factory outers. All right, so I've got the metal all prepped and ready to go over here. But as I was doing a bunch of test fitting, you know, a lot of this feeds into obviously how the next piece of the puzzle goes, right? So if you just build it piece by piece sequentially, you know, if one piece is put in slightly out, it affects all the subsequent pieces, all right? So the problem that part of the problem I'm still running into is that the fact that on one hand you want to make sure everything is perfectly square. On the other hand, you're trying to line it up to something that was not perfectly square to begin with, right? So if you make all of your stuff perfectly square, well, that doesn't mean it won't line up with the body. You know, there's just places where it's about 1/8 of an inch out, and you can see where those tolerances are, where they just put this thing, I'm sure it was in some kind of jig or fixture or something, but there was probably all kinds of slop in the thing. Is, again, not too surprising, but you know, if you make everything perfectly square and you try and line it up to the body here, it won't line up. So what I'm going to do is, the more pieces that you can put together ahead of time, and by put together I mean preferably just clamp. It seems like every week I buy more clamps. Or maybe some spot welds or something, but so I'm going to try putting the quarter panels on and the rear tail pan. So I've got this rear part put in here. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to say too is that I've purchased a spot welder. So it's the one from Harbor Freight. It's a 230 volt version, and man, I really like that thing. You know, you got to keep those tips sharp, but the biggest thing I found about using it is that you really need good bare metal to bare metal contact to get it to work best. But in places where I can reach, so you can see here, these are the spot welds I've done, and it's so much easier. It's just 2 or 3 seconds and you're done, and it's a great weld. Versus over here where I couldn't, if it'll focus, where I couldn't reach, I had to do the traditional plug weld. So along the edge here, I've done all these spot welds. And so I plan to use it wherever I can. I did it for the pinch welds in the floor pan, although I did still do some plug welds. But you know, for the amount of money and time and effort you're investing in this car, or these types of projects, I forget how much it was, $150, $200, something like that. It's worth it. The other thing I wanted to mention too was a note about the primer, weld-through primer, things like that. So anyone who's looking at this has probably seen the 68 Camaro that Mr. Fireman's doing as well, and his videos have been tremendously helpful. He's made some of the same mistakes that I almost did, but so he did a great thing on weld-through primers. One of the things that I've been using is this, where is it? So this is the copper welds, SEM, And so there was a big discussion about what's better, the copper, the zinc, and the boiling point. So this one it's a combination of both of them. It's copper and zinc. It's brushable. So on seams, I like to use that where I can. But so that's pretty much where I am now, right? So I haven't put the seat in because I'm going to do the subframe tie-in in the back, and that way I won't have to remove the seat or cut it out or replace it or anything like that. Anyway, so that's about it. Keep walking around this thing. I don't know what else to show you guys, but don't want to zoom in on too close anyway. Crappy welds, but that's about all I've got to say. As I mentioned, you know, I've had the new replacement panels for a while, the quarter panel, and a bunch of other pieces, the roof. So when I did this last epoxy primer coat, and apparently one man's gray is not another man's gray, but not that it matters. But so when I did that, I also did the inside of the rocker panels, the underside of the roof, so I can kind of put those in. But it's going to be fun trying to hold all this stuff together so I can get everything lined up so I can put in the tubs and everything. But that's the best way to do it. So the only other thing I really wanted to mention was not so much just about the technical aspect of this, was just the motivation, right? And yeah, I don't want to say getting motivated to do it because it's something that's interesting, and trying to do this at the rate where I put one thing in and pay it off and put another thing in, but you're still putting a fair amount of money into it, even though you're doing all the labor yourself. So money is one thing. You start to kind of think about all the other things you could be doing with all this money. But also just, for me personally, you know, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, right? So I think the deepest part is when you keep going down this hole of things getting worse and worse in terms of taking this apart, and taking this apart, and taking this apart, and have to do that, and have to do that. And being at the bottom and just sitting there with this thing that's just going to take you forever to put back together, and really realizing how much you've bit off, maybe more than you can chew, but it's like eating an elephant, right? One bite at a time. And but I think I've turned the corner in a sense that now that things are going back together, when I work on it, the car is coming together and not coming apart. So I'm sure there'll still be a lot of challenges to come, right? A lot of the sheet metal. But, you know, once I can start bolting the front clip on and getting all that done, so my plan is, as I mentioned, do the back end of the quarters, because I have those, and those that would put everything in place. And then the probably do the 4-link for the DSE. I might do, I saw they had a replacement for the spring leaf pockets to kind of strengthen it. So, as I've mentioned before in some of the previous videos, you know, the engine is going to be just a stock ls3. And so I'm keeping some of the front stock in terms of the stamp, steel, control arms, things like that, because at some point in the future, after I get this back together on the road, it would be relatively easy to replace the whole front clip, do the tubular control arms, do some rack and pinion, do all the good stuff up front, and at the same time replace the engine. So that's kind of the whole front end. But you know, I'll have time to do that later. And but what I wanted to do was make sure that the whole rest of it behind here was all up to snuff. So, which means, you know, good rear axle. Probably do the full floater with the Ford 9-inch and all the good stuff in the back, and the drivetrain to support increased horsepower, and size of the fuel pump accordingly, and the fuel lines and everything, so that when I'm done with all that, I can just upgrade the power as I want, you know, up to whatever, I don't know, but make sure I have a good beefy rear end and drivetrain, so I don't have to worry about that fuel pump and all that. So that's it. You know, after that, after I get the quarters on and probably the rear end, I will do another video. I'm not going to even attempt to say when it might come out, but as it's being fall here, it's not as much fun to work out in the garage, and after putting in a lot of time over the past 4 or 5 months on this, maybe I'm getting to the point where I'm burned out and need to put it away again for a month or so, and before I get back into it. But I've got other projects to work on over the winter, so we'll see how I get to it. But the good news is that I've turned the corner, made a lot of progress. Things are coming together. I'm getting better at welding and understanding the process. So that's about it. Until next time.